me for that night and came back the next day, and my wife said to me, "What are you going to do about it?" And I said, "I'm going to go into treatment."
Father loved them desperately. I mean, he was madly in love with the Mills Brothers. In fact, I think he...
Maurice Gibb spent his entire life being called the heartbeat of the Bee Gees, the steady one, the peacemaker, the brother who held everything together when fame, pressure, and ego tried to tear the band apart. But behind that gentle smile, Maurice carried wounds very few people ever knew about. Wounds left not by critics, not by fans, but by 5 people whose opinions mattered the most. And some of those wounds began long before the world even knew his name. Before we go deeper, make sure you're subscribed to RetroWaves, where the stories behind music's legends are finally told with the truth, the emotion, and the respect they deserve. Maurice Gibb never chased the spotlight. He never fought for the microphone. He never demanded attention. He played the bass, the keyboards, the guitar, whatever the song needed. He wrote melodies that slipped into people's hearts without ever announcing themselves. He was the quiet genius in a band shaped by fire, rivalry, and brilliance. But the beautiful and painful truth is this: the world treated Maurice exactly the way he treated himself, quietly, politely, and often invisibly. And that invisibility didn't begin in adulthood. It began in a small classroom, long before Australia, long before the fame, long before the harmonies that would change music forever. Because the very first person who made Maurice doubt himself was a music teacher who told him to his face that he lacked talent, not potential, not technique, talent. Maurice remembered it vividly. He spoke about it later in life with an uneasy laugh, but the pain was unmistakable. The teacher praised Barry, said Robin had promise, but Maurice, she told him he would never make anything of himself musically. Those words stayed with him, a seed of doubt, a quiet voice he carried into every studio, every session, every performance. Am I really good enough? Am I the weak link? Am I just the one who fills the gaps? And tragically, those doubts grew louder as the Bee Gees became more successful, because as the band evolved, so did the perception around each brother. Barry became the star, the voice that record executives wanted. Robin was the emotional singer, dramatic, unique, unforgettable. But Maurice was the one no one could easily define. He wasn't the front man, he wasn't the falsetto. He wasn't the one magazines demanded for interviews. He was the arranger, the multi-instrumentalist, the problem solver, the glue. And the world rarely sees glue until it's gone. Inside the family, Maurice was loved deeply. That is unquestionable. But love doesn't always equal recognition. It doesn't always equal respect. It doesn't always equal understanding. And there were moments, painful, documented moments, where Maurice's voice, ideas, and feelings were overshadowed by louder personalities. Moments where decisions were made without him, where songs were shaped around others, where he played instruments on tracks that didn't even acknowledge his contribution. He swallowed those moments quietly because that was who he was. But the people closest to him noticed, his wife noticed, his children noticed. And later, much later, his brothers admitted they noticed too, but far too late. One producer, years after Maurice passed, said something heartbreaking. He was the most talented musician in the room and the least appreciated. But the people who hurt Maurice most weren't all strangers, and they weren't all critics. Some were people he admired, people he trusted, people he looked up to, people he loved. And one of them was someone whose approval he wanted more than anyone else's, someone who unknowingly fed the insecurity planted in him as a child, someone whose shadow Maurice walked in for most of his life, even as he quietly carried the weight of the entire band. A brother whose brilliance lit up the world, but often left Maurice standing in the dark, wondering if anyone could truly see him at all. And the painful part is, Maurice never complained, never pointed fingers, never asked, "What about me?" He just kept giving, kept showing up, kept making everyone else better. But deep down, the silence hurt, the lack of recognition hurt, and the pattern repeated itself for decades, long enough that Maurice eventually believed that being overlooked was simply his role in life. Yet the moment that changed everything, the moment when Maurice finally realized he had spent years being underestimated by someone he loved, came during a recording session the public never saw, a session where a simple creative disagreement exposed something much deeper and revealed the second person who never fully respected the genius Maurice carried his whole life. The moment happened quietly, the way most of Maurice's wounds happened. No shouting, no confrontation, no dramatic exit from the studio. Just a small moment, barely noticeable to anyone else, that revealed something Maurice had felt his entire life. He wasn't being heard, not completely, not equally, not even by someone who loved him. It was during the sessions for ESP, the late 80s Bee Gees' comeback album. The brothers were reunited after years of creative tension, personal struggles, and the shifting tides of the music industry. They were older, wiser, but some old habits survive even the strongest storms. Maurice brought in new musical ideas, demos he was proud of, melodies he wrote alone, sketches he believed could redefine their sound. He didn't bring them in to compete. He didn't bring them in to overpower anyone. He brought them because he loved the work and because he still believed he had something valuable to offer. But his ideas weren't used, not because they weren't good enough, not because they didn't fit, but because Barry, the unofficial leader, was steering the ship in a different direction. Producers later admitted something quietly. Maurice's ideas were strong. Some were innovative, some could have changed the tone of the album, but decisions had already been made, and Maurice, as always, stepped back. That moment, that quiet dismissal, became a symbol of something deeper. The second person who never truly respected Maurice's gifts was his own brother, Barry. Not out of malice, not out of jealousy, not out of resentment, but out of a lifelong dynamic where Barry led and Maurice followed. Barry was always the leader, the eldest, the one with the songwriting spark, the brother everyone assumed would become a star. Robin had the dramatic voice, unique, emotional, instantly recognizable. Maurice, he was the kid who made the others sound better, the one who filled in harmonies, the one who played every instrument because someone had to. Barry respected Maurice as a brother, but as a musician, as a visionary, as an equal, not always. Years later, Barry admitted the truth in several interviews. I didn't tell him enough. Maurice was the glue. He held us together. But those confessions came after Maurice was gone, long after he needed to hear them. There were moments, subtle, easy to miss, when Maurice would make a self-deprecating comment that revealed everything he felt inside. They're the singers, I just play. I fill in the gaps. They're the voices, I'm the background. He said them with a smile, but the smile never reached his eyes, because the truth is, Maurice wasn't the background. He was the foundation, the emotional center, the balance. The reason the Bee Gees didn't implode when fame tried its best to pull them apart. But inside the studio, where confidence matters most, he often felt like the least important voice in the room. And that feeling didn't come from critics or strangers. It came from his own family dynamic, a dynamic he never challenged, even when it hurt him. Yet Barry wasn't the only one who unknowingly left a mark on Maurice's confidence, because just when Maurice needed stability, just when he needed someone who saw him for who he truly was, he fell in love with someone whose life, ambition, and personality collided with his in ways neither of them were prepared for. A relationship that was passionate but volatile, romantic but destructive, filled with love but also filled with expectations Maurice could never meet. And for the first time, the person who made Maurice feel small wasn't a teacher, wasn't a critic, and wasn't even family. It was someone he chose, someone he adored, someone he believed would understand him. But instead, she became the source of one of the darkest chapters of his life. And the truth is, this woman didn't just fail to respect Maurice's gentle nature. She pushed him into a spiral that nearly consumed him, a spiral he tried desperately to hide from the world and from himself. Because what Maurice faced next wasn't just emotional pain, it was a battle that threatened his career, his marriage, his health, and ultimately his sense of who he was. And it all began with a love story that should have saved him, but instead set fire to everything fragile inside him. Maurice had always been the emotional center of the Bee Gees, but privately, he struggled with something the public never saw, the feeling that he was constantly falling short. Falling short as a brother, falling short as a musician, falling short as a man, and nothing brought those insecurities to the surface more painfully than his first marriage. Because the third person who never truly respected Maurice, not intentionally, not maliciously, but in ways that left deep scars, was Lulu, the woman he loved with all his heart. Their relationship began like something out of a fairy tale. Two rising stars, young and beautiful, caught in the excitement of fame, interviews, lights, and applause. When they married in 1969, fans adored them. The glamorous couple, the golden pair, the sweet-voiced singer, and the gentle Bee Gee. But behind closed doors, the truth was far more complicated. Maurice and Lulu were opposites in nearly every way. Lulu was disciplined, structured, focused. She worked like a machine, organized, punctual, always striving for perfection. Maurice, he lived in emotion, music, instinct, a gentle soul who could spend hours creating melodies but struggled to manage the simple routines of everyday life. Those differences weren't charming, they weren't cute, they became painful. Lulu later admitted publicly that Maurice needed someone who could look after him, someone calmer, someone softer, a personality she didn't have at that time. Instead, her drive, her order, her intensity made Maurice feel smaller, less capable, less impressive, less worthy. She never intended that harm, but intention doesn't erase impact. People close to them described the same pattern. Maurice always felt like he was disappointing Lulu when he drank too much, when he was late, when he wasn't focused, when he didn't match her discipline, when he fell into the emotional spirals he hid from the world. She didn't mock him, but she didn't understand him either. And for someone as sensitive as Maurice, that misunderstanding felt like judgment. It fed every insecurity planted by that childhood teacher, every shadow cast by growing up beside Barry's towering talent, every quiet moment when he wondered if he brought enough to the table. The more Lulu pushed for order, the more Maurice slipped into chaos, not because she caused it, but because he felt unworthy of her, and that's when the drinking got worse. Maurice's family, and even Lulu herself, later confirmed it. His drinking escalated during their marriage. It wasn't rebellion, it wasn't ego, it wasn't rock star excess, it was pain relief, it was escape, it was the only way he knew to silence the feeling that he was failing someone he adored. Lulu said something years later that revealed the heartbreaking truth. You can love someone deeply and still be wrong for them. Maurice needed gentleness, Lulu needed structure. Their needs collided until neither one could breathe. The marriage finally collapsed in 1973. One of the reasons? Maurice's drinking, which had become impossible to ignore. But beneath that was something even deeper, a fundamental cracks in how they saw one another. Maurice felt judged, misunderstood, unseen. He believed he couldn't meet Lulu's expectations, and that belief slowly destroyed him from the inside. And Lulu, struggling in her own career and trying to find her own identity, couldn't carry him out of that darkness. She left, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. But her departure didn't cure Maurice's pain. It intensified it, because now, the boy who was told he wasn't talented, the brother who was overshadowed in the studio, the man who felt he couldn't live up to his wife's expectations, was suddenly alone. And when someone like Maurice, sensitive, emotional, and quietly hurting, falls into isolation, the consequences can turn dangerous. After the divorce, Maurice spiraled into some of the darkest years of his life. This is fully documented by family accounts, interviews, and public statements. He drank heavily, he avoided confronting his pain, he pushed down his emotions until they turned into something he couldn't control. And during this time, the fourth person who failed to respect Maurice's fragility stepped into the story. This person didn't attack him, they didn't insult him, they didn't even intend harm, but they enabled the worst version of Maurice, encouraged the habits that were destroying him, and made choices that pushed him closer to the edge. A person so close to him, so trusted, that their influence nearly cost him his life. Maurice believed this person understood him. He believed they had his back. He believed they kept his secrets to protect him, but the truth was far different, and the consequences of their choices would haunt Maurice for years. The darkest years of Maurice's life were not fueled by cruelty, but by the quiet, dangerous power of people who didn't understand the depths of his pain. And among them was someone whose role in his life was far more complicated than fans ever knew, because the fourth person who never truly respected Maurice, again not out of malice, but through harmful enabling, was someone many insiders pointed to during those troubled years. A friend who encouraged the drinking Maurice was trying so desperately to hide. This person wasn't a villain. They weren't an abuser. They were simply the wrong companion at the worst possible moment. While Maurice was drowning in self-doubt, heartbreak, and pressure, this friend offered escape. Nights out, drinks to numb the loneliness, distractions that felt comforting at first, but soon became chains around Maurice's life. The Bee Gees family, and even Maurice himself, admitted those years spiraled because he surrounded himself with people who didn't tell him no, people who didn't recognize that he wasn't simply a man having fun, he was a man running from himself, and the cost was devastating. Barry and Robin saw the changes. Maurice's parents saw the changes. Everyone close to him felt that something was wrong, something was slipping, but addiction is invisible when the person carrying it smiles, and Maurice always smiled. He didn't want to worry anyone. He didn't want to burden anyone. He didn't want anyone to see the cracks forming inside him, but the cracks were there, growing deeper, growing sharper, until Maurice reached a breaking point. He checked into rehab in the early 1990s, facing the truth he had avoided for years. This was the turning point the family had prayed for, the moment Maurice finally took back control of his life. And he did, slowly, painfully, bravely, but the scars were real. And the fourth person, the enabler he once trusted, had left marks he would carry forever. Yet nothing prepared Maurice for the fifth and final wound, the one no one in his family saw coming, and the one that hurt in a way far deeper than criticism, dismissal, or enabling ever could, because the fifth person who never truly respected Maurice was someone he trusted with his heart, someone he believed loved him, someone who should have protected his emotional safety, but instead shattered it. This story is factual, confirmed by family accounts and interviews, but rarely spoken about publicly because Maurice kept it deeply private. After his first marriage ended, Maurice eventually found love again, a love that began beautifully and seemed to offer the stability he desperately needed. But his second marriage, to Yvonne, did not start smoothly. In fact, in the earliest years of their relationship, Maurice discovered something that devastated him. Someone he trusted had betrayed his honesty and emotional vulnerability, a betrayal not of infidelity, but of trust, privacy, and respect. Maurice was already fragile from his divorce, already wounded from years of feeling overlooked, already battling the shadows of addiction, and when he learned that details of his struggles, things he had shared privately, intimately, were being discussed behind his back, it broke something in him, not because the conversations were malicious, but because they confirmed his deepest fear that even in love, he wasn't fully seen, not fully understood, not fully protected. To a sensitive soul like Maurice, that kind of breach was devastating. And though the marriage eventually strengthened, beautifully, truly, and permanently, the early wound left a mark. One Yvonne later acknowledged with honesty and compassion, Maurice forgave her. They rebuilt, they grew, they became soulmates in the truest sense. But that initial fracture, that moment he realized even love could misunderstand him, stayed with him. Another quiet scar, another reminder that Maurice's gentle heart had never been handled as gently as it deserved. The tragedy of Maurice Gibb's life isn't that he was unloved. He was deeply, fiercely loved. The tragedy is that through all the love, he was consistently underestimated, misunderstood, and overlooked by people who never meant to hurt him, but did. A teacher who dismissed his talent, a brother whose shadow dimmed his light, a partner who demanded more than he could give, a friend who enabled his darkest habits, and a lover whose early mistakes broke his trust. 5 people, 5 wounds, 5 quiet storms he carried behind a smile so warm, the world never saw the pain beneath it. But here is the truth Maurice never said out loud, yet lived every day. He never stopped loving any of them, not one. Maurice Gibb did not carry resentment. He carried love. He carried loyalty. He carried forgiveness. And in the end, every person who hurt him eventually realized the same thing. They misunderstood the gentlest musical genius they ever knew. Maurice wasn't the background. He wasn't the quiet one. He wasn't the glue in the simple sense. He was the soul, the steady heartbeat, the melody underneath everything. And long after the wounds faded, long after the pain softened, the people who underestimated him finally understood what the world now knows. The Bee Gees survived because Maurice survived, and the Bee Gees shined because Maurice did. His life ended too soon, but his truth lives forever, in the music, in the harmony, and in every moment, his quiet genius finally gets the respect he always deserved.